Planet Dolan.
From spooky haunted schoolhouses to aliens with missing eyeballs, the Planet Dolan crew reenacts some of the best true stories from our subreddit about the scariest encounters you've had with the supernatural. My name is Nixium, and today I'll be your narrator. Number 10 was submitted by Aelryn. When Dolan was 15 years old, he snuck into an abandoned schoolhouse with his friend Talop. They were looking around when they heard a thump coming from a basement hatch. After they worked up the courage to go down into the basement, they discovered a room full of dusty school uniforms that smelled like dead bodies. Suddenly, they heard a young girl giggling, and they decided to get the hell out of there. When Dolan went to open the hatch, a young girl stuck her head out over the exit before the hatch was slammed shut. They ran back to Dolan's house nearby, and they looked at the schoolhouse through Dolan's bedroom window. And there, a shadowy figure looked back at them from the house before it slowly closed the back door and was never seen again. Number 9 was submitted by DeathDrivesaFord. A few years ago, Pringle was devastated by his friend Todd's suicide. They had hung out a lot, and Todd loved to adjust the music on Pringle's stereo. He even nicknamed Todd the Jam Master. Todd unfortunately passed away at around 3 a.m. the night he died. 2 nights after his death, though, Pringle woke up to hear his stereo turn on. He thought it was weird, and he got out of bed to turn it off, making sure that no knobs had been moved. The next night, it came on again at exactly 3 a.m. This time, he totally freaked out and sat up in bed screaming, "Todd, stop it!" The next morning, he noticed the stereo had been configured exactly the way Todd used to set it. He left it that way, and it never happened again. Number 8 was submitted by Zippy101. One night, Dolan's brother didn't feel tired, so he got out of bed and went to the kitchen for a snack. He opened up the fridge, and suddenly, he heard a noise come from upstairs. He figured it must be the dog, so he went back to bed, but he woke up an hour later to the sound of whispering. It was quiet, and he couldn't make out what it was saying. He rolled over, and there was a man with a ripped jacket, ripped jeans, and long black hair kneeling at his bed. As soon as he saw him, the man got up and ran towards the door, passing right through it. Needless to say, Dolan's brother didn't get that much sleep that night. Number 7 was submitted by TerrorClaws. When Melissa was in high school, a student who was pregnant had committed suicide by hanging herself in the middle of one of the classrooms. It was rumored that her ghost could be seen hanging there after dark. Well, she and her friend Gooby decided to sneak into school one night and investigate. They didn't notice anything unusual until they heard someone sobbing. They turned their torches and saw a girl in a school uniform with her arms reaching for them, screaming. They screamed back, and they ran for their lives. And apparently, to this day, you can still hear her crying when the classroom is quiet. Number 6 was submitted by HasherBrownz. Doopy was sitting in the library after school one time when she heard someone walking and letting out groans of pain. She felt a tap on her shoulder, and she turned to see a man. He had scars on the front of his head, his arms were longer than a human should be, and his legs were twisted like an animal's. He smiled and he whispered, "Let's play hide and seek. You have 3 seconds." She ran and ran, running down the hall, and heard a screech as he followed. She looked back to see him grinning wildly. Later that year, a fellow student ended up with horrible scratches on his face from what she said was a crazy creature in the library. and she hasn't gone back to that library ever since. Number 5 was submitted by taurphan. Emoji had just finished watching an anime marathon and was getting ready to go to bed. It was a stormy, rainy night, and lightning flashed in the sky. As he brushed his teeth, he looked out his window to find a white Labrador fast asleep at the base of a tree. He went outside to call out to it, but when he looked out, he saw nothing. So, he scurried back upstairs to continue with his bedroom routine. He looked out the window again, and there was the dog, sleeping. The creepy thing is, the next morning on the news, a white Labrador had been found slaughtered in the backyard of a house nearby. And so for the next few nights, the ghost of the dog continued to reappear, sleeping peacefully next to the tree stump. Number 4 was submitted by Kilgore5. One time, Ghost Toast awoke in his dorm room to a very chilling image. As he opened his eyes one morning, he found a figure standing over his roommate, holding a clipboard and seemingly taking notes on it. The person then slowly turned around to look at Ghost Toast, but he couldn't recognize its face until it did something horrifying. As it looked at him, its whole face split open and it began screaming. There was no actual sound coming from its mouth, but he could feel it. He immediately retreated back under his covers, and when he finally had the courage to look again, it was gone. Needless to say, he couldn't fall back to sleep for a very long time. Number 3 was submitted by a random Chavez 121322. One night around 3 a.m., Pandora was still awake watching videos when she heard her front door open. At first, she thought it was her roommate coming back from a party, but when she walked out of her room, she saw a strange shadow creature standing in front of her. She stood there in shock and couldn't move her body. Panicking, she closed her eyes as tightly as she could, and when she opened them, she was in her bathroom, lying on the floor with no idea how she got there. She never found out what happened or what the creature was. Number 2 was submitted by RavenousRamen. One night, Hellbent woke up at around 2 a.m. and realized he could hear a faint music box. He got up and he went to the attic to check it out, and he found a bizarre-looking creature sitting in the moonlight. It was a tall, alien-like girl with short gray hair, a pink dress, and scars around her throat and legs. She also had no eyes, just sockets, with blood pouring out of them. She was tampering with the music box and looked up to see Hellbent. "Can you help me? Please?" Her fingers were connected and looked like claws. She had trouble winding up the music box. Hellbent just panicked and ran back to his room, slamming the door behind him. And number 1 was submitted by me. When I was very young, I used to ghost hunt in my house using an old video camera with night vision, as well as a tape recorder. I used to call out to see what would reply, and eventually, something did. After a series of yes or no questions, I learned that the spirit I had contacted was a young girl who I called Jenny. My friends would come over and spend the night sometimes, and I'd introduce them to Jenny and then laugh at how scared they'd become when I'd ask her to move an object or to make a noise, and then it happened. It was great. Well, eventually I fell out of the ghost hunting hobby, but when I was around 20 years old, I started to have these very weird dreams in my house. In them, I'd see a small girl hiding in the shadows of rooms in my home, watching me, and sometimes she would run at me, screaming in the darkness, as if trying to grab me. I didn't think much of it at first, but I'd keep having the same dream almost every week. This went on for about 4 months, until I grew so freaked out, I went and talked to a friend of mine who was much more experienced in this kind of stuff than I was. After a long talk, he asked me about Jenny, the spirit that I hadn't even thought of in years. But he told me that most likely Jenny was trying to make contact with me again for whatever reason. It was disturbing, I admit, but I followed his advice, and I calmly told her one evening while I was alone to leave me be and to stop entering into my dreams. And after that, the dreams just stopped completely. But the fact that Jenny had the ability to sneak into my head and project horrifying images into my dreams, it still disturbs me to this day. So, a huge thanks to the folks over at our Planet Dolan subreddit for submitting their stories. But we have another question for you. What's your scariest Halloween experience? Let us know in the Reddit page linked below, and you might be featured in a future countdown. It seems I have to leave you now, mortals, but don't worry, I shall return.
At the time, a young woman lived there alone. The half-dozen soldiers each took turns raping her and then knocked her unconscious and burnt the house with her inside. The house was rebuilt with the only original part left being the basement.